Hello, today I'm joined by Mike Graves by popular demand. Thanks for joining me, Mike. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, my honor.
Okay, I usually start off asking about my guests' sort of martial arts background and main teachers. So
Sure
could you tell
thing.
us a little bit about your teachers and your martial arts background, please?
Sure thing. Yeah. So I started my Tai Chi journey back in 1995. So close to 29, 30 years right now in practice. My first teacher was a gentleman by the name of Bob France. He was out of the lineage of Chu King Hung and a few others because he also started teaching me the Chin Man Ching form, actually. Although he had a traditional form background in Yang style. Not a martial artist per se, kind of primarily focused on very good principles within Tai Chi, understanding structure. I mean, first day I met him, he had me stand there, the typical Tai Chi thing. He pushed me backwards like crazy. My eyes opened up like, oh crap, what is this? So, and then I kind of picked his brain about doing the martial side of things. And I had a book on different martial arts. And I said, yeah, I'm very interested in learning some Bagua. And so he introduced me to another fellow friend of his who also studied under the lineage of Chu King Hung. His name was David Nicholson, who became my primary teacher. And I went to Dave to go learn some Bagua. And the first day I met him, he had me do what I knew of Tai Chi. And I think maybe, I don't think I even had a year in at that time of Tai Chi practice. So, I did my little demo of what I knew of Tai Chi. He's got his, chin and, his face, and he goes, "Oh, your Tai Chi's crap." I'm not teaching you anything else until we get your Tai Chi better. I'm not teaching you anything else. So, so I started going to both fellows to learn, traditional Yang style Tai Chi is what I was learning initially. And then with Dave, I kind of continued my journey. I stuck with both of them for a while. I was going to Tai Chi classes probably like 5 to 6 times a week. I was like a Tai Chi geek at that time, really, really immersed into it. And then I got more deeper and deeper to the martial side of things. I stuck with Bob France. He did a lot of the more of the esoteric part of Tai Chi, working heavily in Qigong and things of that nature. Yeah.
And how do you feel about that now? So obviously my sort of blog is primarily about Wu. So a lot of people may be quite skeptical about Qi and the esoteric aspects of Tai Chi. And what's your take on Qi and Qigong and the usefulness of that kind of training?
Well, I kind of keep them in almost sometimes two separate baskets per se. I don't discount the Qigong practice because I teach at university. I teach for the kinesiology program at a university here. So I use that as part of my curriculum, if you will. So I don't discount it per se, but I do keep it as two separate things. There's Qigong.
So in terms of fighting, you don't think you can knock people over with Qi power, or you don't think?
Oh no, I do that all the time. No, I do that all the time. That's how I get my powers to the Qi. No, just kidding. No, I'm joking. No, I don't believe in that at all. In that aspect of things, right? I do think it has a benefit to making you obviously extremely healthy. Very mindful of how you practice. I think it's also very empowering to keep the body engaged as to what you want to apply in more of a martial practice, I guess, if you will. But I don't see that it creates this phenomenon that's just normally related to it, if you will. I do know people that are separate of Tai Chi who's practiced Qigong and has made them very healthy from issues as far as being having severe issues with cancer. Even they didn't practice with me, of course, but they practice on their own and they give that full credit. And I don't discount that for them. I give that credit for them. For myself, I never had any health issues. So I always let other people give their testimonials. I just use it as a way that within my practice that helps me stay empowered through the practice itself. But I don't use it as a mechanism to give me superhuman powers, if you will.
And I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about obviously how you kind of went from Tai Chi to full contact fighting. Because maybe there's not that many Tai Chi fighters out there. And I know you went to some competitions in the UK, which is sort of a long way from Texas. So I wasn't sure what brought you to competitive Sanda, maybe in UK competitions. And And I guess if there are people who maybe just do form and maybe they want to get moved down to more the martial or fighting side, do you have any sort of suggestions for how to progress from
Yeah,
just
I,
doing
I
form
definitely do. I
to
mean,
fighting? Yeah.
so I give my teacher David Nicholson, full credit in that regard. And there are some others that I think we'll touch on as far as that path and that journey to help me stay improved in that field. But David Nicholson was very adamant about Tai Chi being a martial art, and that's the way he trained. And he was a diehard in both Qigong and Tai Chi practice. But we always looked at how to bridge, going from form and to understanding the applications, using pushing hands as a mechanism to making a bridge between understanding applications and where to find applications. And I say push hands as a big umbrella, from doing different patterns, from doing moving steps to the dalu,
Yeah.
so forth and so on. And all of that kind of informed your form and inform the applications on how they work, on how to actually feel what's coming, and then how to redirect, and how to feel when somebody's at their weakest, and then you can go into your next motion. So the bridge was really being informed through your form, like really looking at your form movements and understanding what the applications meant. And usually we had a series of applications per movement. It's like finding how many different ways of applying something depending on what's coming your way, and not labeling one, this application is for I throw to the side, that's it. I mean, it's like, oh no, hold on, wait a minute, I just found this here. And we found that a lot through doing pushing hands. So the bridge itself was just going those, if you want to say, in a very micro level of going through each part of the training, if you will, from form to pushing hands to applications, and drilling. I saw that someone had posted up, and I know Alan had mentioned that. I know some other people had mentioned that drillers make killers, and that's what we were heavy on. We were heavy on doing a lot of drill work, and that means the repeating a form movement over and over again. That's why I give my first teacher, Bob Frantz, credit. I mean, only thing I did from the first 2 weeks for an hour and a half class was open my stance, lift my arms shoulder height. All right, close my feet, go back. And I did that for like, dang, that's all I'm gonna do for the first my class. Yeah. The next week I'm doing the exact same thing, But I give so much credit to that. So much credit to doing it at such a a limited level of understanding. But so with those movements, some of the things that Dave always reinforced was to explore things outside of our avenue. He was very free about, right, go and see if that works on that guy that's doing Wing Chun. All right, go see if it works on that guy that's doing, this over here. That's, so he was always curious on, like, how does this work? And, don't worry if it doesn't work. We'll figure out why it's not working. We're gonna,
and I guess that testing is sort of against other styles is sort of a key thing that many schools are quite afraid to do, that they don't want to go to other people's classes and get pushed around or fail. That there's not really, I get the sense that there's not really a culture of that kind of behavior in most Tai Chi schools, that maybe they're worried that if they try their skills against other people and that they're not very good, that this will sort of bring shame on their lineage. I was also quite curious to ask about, say, if there's a new student and they say, Mike, what's push hands? Can you explain it to me? Why am I doing it? How would you sort of, I guess, what's your philosophy with push hands? Because you mentioned the fixed patterns, and actually my current teacher doesn't do the fixed patterns. He just sort of does free pushing, and it is quite a big spectrum. With on one end you're essentially doing a two-person form, and then the other end we're kind of wrestling or nearly fighting, but without the punching and kicking. So I guess how do you explain it, and what's your sort of philosophy for push hands?
So when I'm teaching in my university class, because everyone's unfamiliar with it, so and we'll do a class where we're gonna do some partner work, and I just call it partner work, right? And I said, what we're gonna do, first thing, we're gonna test each other's balance, and we're gonna test on working from our center. So usually I have some some prerequisite classes that I introduced, working from the center, turning from, knee to knee is what I call it, right? Don't go past your knee, and then unless you're going to have to move your foot, pivot your foot to give you that extra extension. So I always create that range. And I said, okay, now we're going to use that focus of moving from the center, and we're going to empower our movements. And because I teach so many students that really don't practice Tai Chi, I have athletes in my class. I have wrestlers, I have fencers, I have swimmers, I have baseball players, soccer players. So I reinforce that movement. So like if you're going to throw a ball, what are you doing? You're taking your center and you're throwing, and you don't throw the ball like this, right?
Yeah.
you turn the center, you swing a bat, everything.
So you look at, I guess you look at biomechanics and having the power being generated by the legs and the waist, and not sort of from these muscles as Westerners.
Exactly. And then on that same tangent, what I do is I reinforce the understanding of the concept of yin and yang, right? I always try to simplify it for the students in my classes and say, we're going to work on what I call complementary opposites, left to right, forward and back, up and down, heavy and light, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So I get them to work on that dynamic and get them to start to play. I start to expound a little bit more on why they're playing with. When somebody's pushing heavy on you, you don't want to feel that heaviness on you, right? You want to get it off of you, redirect it. But notice what happens when you redirect it. You're taking them to an extreme to make them feel weak, and now you're going to fire back. And now they're going to have to readjust. So I build it into like this mindset of play, if you will, playing with the balance, right? Then I start to expound on so imagine if that is going back and that's a punch coming towards you, how you're redirecting that punch. And then we start to get into locks and all things. So it's the building blocks of starting off to getting folks to really understand that you're working this mechanics of yin and yang, and you're working on how to, one, stay connected with your partner, try to stay connected with what you're doing, have an intent with your actions, understanding what your range of motion is, understanding what your weaknesses are, where your vulnerabilities are, understanding where your strong points are, and vice versa for your partner. So, I kind of take it from that tangent, right? And then if folks want to explore more, and getting more into the more and more of the martial side, start adding in like more locks, more techniques, and more different styles of pushing hands. In my classes, we do a series of different kind of patterns as well, because I use it as games, if you will, right? So eventually I'll have the class lined up so for instance, there'll be the lead person this way, lead person this way. Now I have a line of people behind them and a line of people behind them, right? So then they'll get there and they'll go, they'll battle a little bit for pushing hands. So this person lost balance, so this person stays here, this person comes up,
Oh, the winner stays on,
Yeah. So it becomes this fun game, but at the same time, they start to learn. And I'll share some stuff with you later on, because I always get feedback from my students at the end of the semester and see how what they've learned benefit whatever practice they have. Because there's some folks who are just, they're just biochemists. So they're not really, an artist. They're not necessarily into physical practice, but the things that they pull from this practice and how, informs the things they do in life, informs me on how well the practice is really, beyond just me trying to teach them a martial art practice. Now, when folks I'm doing, they come to me like, hey, Mike, I want to learn how you do your pushing hands, this, that, and the third. My path may be a little bit different because they're a little bit more informed. So what I'll work on a little bit more on understanding about rooting, understand about watching and what you're feeling. Like my teacher, Dave, would use this analogy, right? He would use the tree in the forest analogy, right? So you're standing by the tree, you hear it crack, right? So you put your hand on the tree, like, oh, crap. So now you're feeling, is the tree heavy? If it's heavy falling into your hand, then you're going to let it go, right? So if you put your hand on it and it cracks and you feel it's feeling like it's going away from you, add on to it so it doesn't come your way, right? Now, if you put your hand on it, now it's not doing anything. So now you got to kind of manipulate and trying to get them to give you some information. So I start to inform them on getting that sense of feel, getting that sense of understanding. And then when they do, that goes beyond just from, starting with hands together. Now, when something's coming your way and that punch is heavy, is it heavy enough that you can keep bringing it in? Or is it that you feel they're going to retract it back that you can follow, or you have to redirect? So, I just kind of take all those kind of things. I know that's kind of a wild tangent, but.
And could I just ask you a bit more about routing? Do you think routing is primarily about how good your structure is, or is there something else to it? Like if you've got good alignments in your body.
So all those
rooted,
things. So one is your structure, one is good alignment. So for instance, I think when you get a good understanding, it's like almost any master of anything, you learn where you can break the rules. right? You learn where you can, kind of go off what is the structured hardline principle of things, right? But it starts with first thing like building a house, having a foundation. So what's your foundation? It's your alignment, it's your structure, it's understanding what is the right gait for your stance, right? So everyone sometimes want to go so deep and widen their stance and want to be as they see the person who's teaching them do, right? But you have to start in your range and build up to whatever your attributes allow, right? And then become self-aware of that, right? Because you may not be able to have the information I have already, or you may never get the flexibility. I never had the flexibility that my instructor had, but I was able to tune into my own attributes and empower those attributes. So what I'm trying to do all the time when I'm teaching folks root is first thing is where do you feel that you can actually absorb something, and then when you have to let it go. All right.
Yeah.
So when do you feel that your structure is being compromised, and then you have to make adaptations to that, right? You got to make changes, and the changes are based on a principle. All right.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the redirection. It goes back with sending something away from you, so forth and so on.
Yeah. So a lot of it's about knowing how much force your structure can take, and when you need to redirect that force and when you need to absorb that force. And I guess I'm sort of curious about your experiences, competitive pushing hands. I mean, I'm sort of a little bit skeptical sometimes about the value of this. And I guess there's many different rule sets that are used, and often the rule sets kind of determine what, if throws are allowed, or there's moving step or fixed step. So I know you've done some push hands competition. Could you sort of talk a little bit about, I guess, the value that you've seen in that, and I guess your thoughts on competitive pushing hands, and push hands is a long way from fighting as well. So I guess sometimes you can train bad habits, especially with fixed step push hands, where things that work when the person isn't trying to hit you and can't move their feet may not work in a more dynamic situation. So can you talk a little bit more about your competitive push hands experience, and I guess what you feel you gained from that, and maybe some thoughts on, I don't know, rule sets, and I guess progressing on from push hands maybe to more Sandow or more free form fighting.
Sure. Yeah. So one thing, I love competition. Let's get that out the way right off the bat. But so my take is very just like the rule sets are, right? So some I like, some I don't like. My experience initially was practicing when I was living in the UK. I was in the UK overall for 13 years, but up in the Yorkshire area when I started my Tai Chi practice for about 5 or 6 years up there, right?
That's where my father's from, actually, Yorkshire.
Oh, for real? Okay.
Yeah.
No, excellent. Yeah. So those were my stomping grounds for a while up there, right? So my take on pushing hands was that it was a bridge for me to getting into the fighting aspects of Tai Chi, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
But it was based on the rule sets that we were going by. We were at I'm pretty sure, obviously, I know you interviewed Alan, so you're familiar with Dan Doherty. So he used to host a fair amount of the competitions there. There was another group there, the Zongding group competitions that we used to go to, as one called Euro Whirl up in Liverpool. That they host their annual pushing hands competition. And then we would go overseas over to Amsterdam and other places to practice as well. But in those rule sets, it was a little bit more open to sweeps, takedowns, locks, throws, so forth and so on. No striking, but you can pick up throws. And so from that aspect, and I always thought maybe later on, not initially, that maybe it shouldn't be called pushing hands because of the whole divide of like, well, pushing hands is just a drill. And I get that, right? It is just a drill, right? So maybe the competition should be called something else. I don't know what it could be called, but you know what I mean?
And do you kind of think the fewer rules, the better? Because often you can't grab below the knee, you can't attack above the neck. Do you prefer to have fewer rules, or do you think that the rules are good for I don't know,
Well,
keeping
I
order
look at it
or
this way, right? So, generally speaking, that comes down to, sanctioning and licensing issues, right? So people don't want to get sued. They don't want people to get injured. So, they're trying to be, cautious in that nature. So therefore they limit to what they can provide in that
Yeah,
particular event that they're hosting. However, I think if you're really going to put something together like that and to give it to its full, dimension, you should be able to, put your hand around someone's back. It's not striking, so you're not necessarily going to strike somebody's spine.
yeah,
And I know they're worried about like hooking around the neck and things like that. But then again, it's like, to me, if that's what you're going to do, and as far as going to a competition, you should be training to that level.
yeah,
You shouldn't be limiting your training to like, okay, well, we're going to limit it to these rule sets where they can't grab to the neck, they can't lock out your arm, they can't scoop your leg up. So then, therefore, you're actually training to a very limited skill set in the first place, right? So I think if you're going to be involved in the competition, you should be fully informed within your skill sets of what's available to yourself in the practice of your art, right? So I'll say this, right? If you want to compare a pushing hands competition to, say, a jiu-jitsu competition, right? So there are jiu-jitsu competitions where there is striking, but generally speaking, there's no striking in jiu-jitsu competitions, right? So that in itself, takes a element out of fighting out of it, right? So we have that same opportunity. We're not striking in there, and I think the problem is most times is where people train Tai Chi, even myself included. They're generally in places where there are no mats. You know what I mean? There's no one going down to the ground or getting thrown down to the ground, and focus so much on getting pushed back and, coming back into play, things of that nature. So then again, when you go into an event where there's going to be someone that's going to do throws, like, whoa, wait a minute, no one's ready for that because I haven't been practicing that way, But we did. We practiced that way. We were so up for it because we looked at it as, all right, this is a martial art, so we're going to practice as such, and we're going to perform it as such. When we go into competition, we're looking for, oh, this dude can lock my arm out, so I'm going to learn how to spiral out of it. I'm going to learn how to, draw my hand back in and scoop him down. You know what I mean? So, and it's funny because we don't even have some of the words that they have in jiu-jitsu, like the double leg takedown, single leg takedowns. Although those are in there, it's just, it's so ill-informed.
I mean, you sent me some videos of you sort of training with some jiu-jitsu guys, and obviously there is kind of a little bit of a crossover, but I found when I did jiu-jitsu that when you're rolling, even if you stand up rolling, they're trying to do very different things. That they're either trying to take you down or defend a takedown or pull guard. Yeah, I'm quite interested to get your experiences with jiu-jitsu players in terms of that there is some crossover, but maybe not a huge crossover between stand-up jiu-jitsu and
I definitely agree. There's not a huge crossover, particularly when you get down on the mat. I mean, one of the compliments I would always get when I was down on the mat is like, "Oh man, you got a great base," So I've created this structure, this roundness structure for my Tai Chi. So, and then also my pressure on the mat, folks can feel like, "Oh my goodness, I feel like you're crushing me down here," So, but when it comes to techniques, getting someone in a triangle, I'm not informed in that way because we don't practice that, so I have to learn those kind of things. So my stand-up is great because my stand-up is informed by pushing hands. So it's always been a challenge for folks to try to get me down. What I mean? Because I'm very good at that. Because I'm also going back to something you mentioned earlier about the limitation of single step. My highest forte was moving step. That was like, my thing. Pushing hands, fixed step was secondary. So back in my days of competition, gold medal all the time for fixed step, bronze or silver for fixed step. You know what I mean? Sorry, moving step. Always gold medal because I like to move. I understand angles. I understand that very well. Know how to get when somebody's coming to shift, boom, boom, go into action, if you will, right? So if you're so used to fixed step, you're gonna have trouble when you're moving around with a person that is used to moving and used to taking folks down. So you have to get out of that element of understanding of movement. A lack of movement, I guess, if you will. So there's things in pushing hands that informs you, like moving your arms off to the side, or having pung, to keep them at bay, keep them from being able to come in. You know, and then when they go down and they're about to drop down, knowing how to keep that distance and that to keep the pung in your arm so that they can't get in underneath.
Can I actually just ask you a little bit more about pung? You haven't used much Chinese vocabulary, and I think maybe pung maybe is the first maybe controversial Chinese term that you've used. I guess I get the impression from what you've said so far that you prefer to stick to English vocabulary with your students. So what is pung and what is jin? How would you explain this to somebody who's not come across?
Excellent. Yes. And yeah, I don't speak Chinese fluently, so I don't try to pretend that I know these words to a cultural degree, because all right, so let me take one step back. The reason why I was in England was because I was a signal analyst, signal intel collection for one of our government agencies, right?
Yeah.
So that's what led me to England. However, my job, it required me to be able to identify 64 different languages, right? Being able to say, oh, man, that's Estonian, or that's right. So different languages out there in the world, right? So, but then when I identify them, I passed them on to a linguist. I didn't go in and try to understand their languages, and because not only just in our language, we're both speaking English, but yet we both speak English from a different cultural perspective.
Definitely, yeah.
So when you start to speak in these Chinese words, there's not just the translation, the phrasing to it. There's cultural reference to these things, right?
Well, definitely. When I talk about qi, maybe I'm not talking about the same thing as when other people talk about qi, and I think maybe we have the same thing with pung. That maybe some people just say, "Oh, pung is that movement from the form," and then other people see pung. Oh no, pung is an expanding ball-like energy. I guess what is pung for you? Is it a
the latter
in the body, or
the latter? Because I think pung and it's from what I've been taught as well through some of David Nicholson. I have some other teachers I'll mention here in a bit. But yes, that they always mention that pung was this sense of buoyancy. It's everywhere. It's not an application, not a singular movement per se. It can be in any movement. Pung can be in any movement, any part of the body. Your body is informed by the pung energy that you feel to be able to keep something at bay, if you will, right? So, the action or the physical manifestation in the form saying of ward off, right? So that's there, right? But ward off is an expression, in my understanding and the way I've been taught. It's not just that movement of ward off. Ward off is anywhere. Because if I had it on my shoulder, I can ward off with my shoulder. I can ward off with my elbow. So that would be my understanding and how I articulate pung. Right, and that's how I explain pung to folks.
And could I ask it? Do you think pung is maybe more important than lu or ji or an, the other jins of Tai Chi? It's often maybe the first one that people come across, and maybe it's the one that you hear the most.
I would say in Yang style, it's one of the primary things that's expressed, right?
Yeah.
You get the Chin style, I practice and I actually train, and I even give tutelage to folks from Chin style that want to learn like pushing hands from me, and I will say, hey, you got spiraling, but you don't have the pung. You don't have that our sense of pung, from the Yang version of pung, if you will, right? So I think stylistically, Yang style definitely uses that more so than any other of the other practices. But even when I do lu, I say there's pung in my lu, because I'm not drawing them in. I'm drawing in and out, and I'm keeping them so they can't even come in.
Definitely,
So even with my my double press, or if I'm going to do my splits, if I'm going to split, I'm going to have pung in that. You know what I mean? So it's like,
in that sense, maybe it is more a little bit more important than the other ones.
Yes, but because I think, at least from my own experience, it can be used in combination with any other kind of expression, any of the other 8 techniques, I guess, if you will, more so than, you can't always find split in application. You can't always find lu in the application. I mean, there is to a sense, slight redirection and, that kind of thing. But not as explicit as you may find Pung. You know,
Yeah.
you're not going to always find elbow, you know, shoulder, you know, those things are not always going to be there, but usually Pung is, you know,
Yeah.
so, you know, so hopefully that helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're probably going to get cut off maybe in about 5 minutes. We could sort of do another meeting if we've not finished.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe one more question I had was your approach to larger opponents. I've sort of seen you being quite successful in push hands with you know, taller, heavier guys. How do you approach pushing with, I don't know, someone who's got 20, 30, 40 or more kilos on you, and longer arms and things like that?
So I'll go back to the old school thing of that's a secret transmission. So I can't expose that at the moment. No. All right. So I simplify it, right? Everyone has a center. Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone has a center. Everyone has a defender center, right? And I've done some videos that I haven't even posted out yet where I'm analyzing competitions. I'm doing like my, you know, breakdown of pushing against competitions. But I refer to this thing that I got from my teacher called the triangle, right? So between the heels and your center line, and between your toes and the center line where your foot placement is, there's this center line that creates a triangle. Your toes, between your toes is the base.
Yeah.
Coming out to the center is your triangle, right? So I just look for the triangle. You know, they got to expose it some way or they got to protect it. So it makes it easy for me because I don't look at just the movement of their arms. I'm not looking at, you know, how necessarily they're trying to base themselves to a degree. I'm looking just for that kind of that
where their structure's weak.
Where their structure is weak.
The perpendicular angle between their legs.
On.
Yeah.
Right on. And then, of course, I'm so informed by my own body that I know how to then project that power or energy into that. And if they respond to it a certain way, then I know that I have to my disposal loose, split, you know, pluck, you know, all these different ones, you know, at my disposal to respond. And so I keep it as a small window of things, and not just. I mean, a lot of times you may not have seen it in some of my play. I keep my eyes closed even when I play. You know, I'm oddball about that, right? So I'm going off of a sense, right? Where I feel that they're trying to give me some energy. So the reason why I'm so successful is because one, I have a very good root. I have a very good understanding of my center. And I'm going to send you another video. And I posted this up in the group of one of my classmates going against this small Chinese fellow in a park in China. And it had a lot of traffic in the fudging group, right?
Yeah.
The guy was using small movements to redirect my classmate. And my classmate was a lot bigger than him. So we studied that video a lot, as we did with all those things back then, right? And it informed us a lot. It's like, oh, I see most of the time, everybody wants to move their center all the time. When they do a motion, I'm going to move my center. I'm going to move my center. I don't need to move my center if it's not being threatened. So, you know what I mean? So I keep my movements very tight. I redirect you here, right?
And then move as little as possible, in a way.
Move as little as possible unless you need to, right? So, and that goes into fighting, right? You don't, it's like when they show you, someone has a tail, right? Someone has a show. They're going to show what they're about to do. They're about to launch a punch. Well, how do you? Yeah. So and you're pushing hands, you could do the same thing. You can be informed by, yes. So you're not trying to expose your own tail, right? So you're trying to keep that as limited as possible. I mean, that's the simplest way I can explain.
I mean, obviously, you must think that size is a big advantage in all martial arts, and often in Tai Chi, people kind of pretend, the little old man can beat the NFL team. And do you kind of believe that the little old man can be successful against a young, athletic attacker, or do you think that's
I think
a bit of a
I think that has
fallacy?
something to do. Yeah, it has to be relative, right? So I have athletes in my class who can't push me, can't move me. And sometimes I have them like, let's do some light little, sparring type stuff, right? And they say, oh, Jesus Christ, you're so fast. I can't even get, because my skill set is much higher. Now, if their skill set was on par with mine or maybe even a little bit higher, I'm definitely going to have trouble, right? So, but that same token is, I mean, it's relative, right? I mean, a bigger person is always going to have the advantage through power, through reach. that reach and that dominance that's a physical attribute. So you got to be intelligent. If you're going to fight someone that's larger, you got to be very in tune with your own skill sets, and you got to be fully aware whether this person is more skillful than you and they have more in their toolbox, right?
Yeah.
So, walking in and not knowing what's on skill set, and you're thinking that you're just going to be able to go and beat every person that's bigger than you because you got good skill, that, it doesn't work across the board. But there's been cases, of where smaller people have been successful against bigger people.
Yeah.
I mean, whether they're skillful or not, you know what I mean? It's, because it's just luck of the draw. But, I think in reality, when it comes down to it, a bigger person is always going to have the advantage over the smaller person. If you're more skilled and you have more tools in your toolbox, then the likelihood of you being successful against a bigger person is going to increase.
Yeah.
It's just as simple as that. I don't think necessarily you're going to outpower them and the physical attributes such as reach and overall power of their mass and force, if you will. But there's going to be instances where, you are, and I've had those cases for myself, beyond just in pushing hands. So I'm fully aware of that, But in reality sense, I think it's just as the typical standard. The bigger person is always going to have that, that edge, I guess. If you
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mike. I think we are about to get cut off. I've really, really enjoyed talking to you. Thanks a lot for your insight.